Hello, my dear friends. Namaste. This is Parinitha Patri, and I am here today to share a very beautiful subject with all of you that I have learned and I am trying to practice. As you have already seen, the subject, the name of the subject is called The Science of Promises, my dear friends. And this is a very, very, very critical an important, a serious subject that we all need to learn and we all need to share with others as well, my dear friends. I have learned this subject. I am trying to apply this science in my life every day. We may be successful sometimes, we may fail sometimes, but yet we still need to keep learning and trying to apply that principle in our life, my dear friends. The science of promises. You must be thinking, what? Promises? Is there a science behind it? Oh, yes, my dear friends, there is definitely a science behind it. And as we are all are trying to be conscious beings, aware beings in all facets of our life, this will also be very helpful in the soul's evolution, my dear friends, in our karma, in what we think, what we say, what we do. So, my dear friends, I bring to you a presentation on the science of promises, my dear friends. This is going to be life-changing. Without any further delay, I would like to start the presentation on the science of promises, my dear friends. Are you ready for it? Are you really ready for it? I'm ready to present. So let's go. Yes, my dear friends, let us start learning about the science of promises. A promise is considered very, very sacred, my dear friends. And in Asia, a sage formulated a saying which emphasizes the importance of a promise. It says that one would rather die than to make a promise. But if he promises, he must fulfill his promise till his death, till his last breath, my dear friends. A promise is considered very sacred. Did you ever think about that at any point of time? So our promises cause certain patterns in relation to their time, daily work, feelings, thoughts, plans, motives, and in their relationships with other people. It works in everything that we do, my dear friends. And let us imagine such a pattern as a set electrical pattern in which things are done automatically according to how it is set. We all have a pattern of things in life that we need to follow, my dear friends. So, promises is such a pattern. As long as the promise continues, things go as they were planned to go. But when the promise is broken, the whole pattern of set activities of the physical, emotional, and mental levels and the set patterns of relationship are disturbed, my dear friends. Yes, my dear friends, that is very true. So that is something we really need to ponder about. How can promises really affect us? Is something we really need to think and wonder. Take your time. Just take your time and think about this. Many physical, emotional, mental disturbances and states of confusion are the result of broken promises, my dear friends. Whether it was a promise formed with a friend, a mother, a father, or your own promise to yourself. No matter who you promise to, we really need to think about the effects of a promise made, a promise fulfilled, or a promise broken, because it has an impact on all levels. mental, physical, emotional, everywhere. So people do not pay attention to this subtle factor which plays a great role in our health, sanity, and behavior. And promises from others or from our own self considerably damages our health and sanity if they are not met and fulfilled. We may end up losing our sanity when we do not, when we keep breaking our promises and when we do not fulfill the promises that we make to others or to ourselves. Isn't that something that we really need to consider thinking and trying to be as aware as possible? So during childhood, unfulfilled promises by parents, teachers, and friends, and society and peers and everybody have such an effect on our system that we may even wait for the fulfillment of the promises for 70 years of our life and run our life in accordance with the thought forms of the promises given to us long ago. So, thus, a promise builds a prison around us and does not let us take self activated actions. Promises made to children, my dear friends. I would request the adults, no matter which role they are playing for the children, to please be mindful when you are promising something to a child. Their minds are very delicate, very subtle. So, when you are trying to promise something that you know that you're never going to fulfill, you better stop yourself from promising that to any child. I'm sure you must have experienced such a thing that when you were a child and somebody promised you something and they did not fulfill it, how did it feel? Betrayal, disappointment, trust, everything's broken. So please be mindful when you are promising something to your child, to a child. When you know that you're not going to fulfill it, please do not promise. Just because you want them to stop crying, or maybe you want them to do something that you would definitely want them to do something, then you tend to promise things that, oh, okay, you know what, if you do this, I will give that to you. But then they will do it. But when they end up not receiving it, they'll be utterly disappointed. So please be careful when you are promising to a child. And great depressions, disillusionments, inertia, and apathy are the result after the thought forms and the expectancy melt away. In such cases, the best way to help is to find the promise and the one who promised it and dissipate the promise through analytical logic, replacing it with a spiritual challenge. A promise can be dissolved, my dear friends, when the promiser and the promisee come together and they try to figure out and they try to analyze, and with reasoning and logic they try to understand it, analyze it, and study it, and then they dissolve it by adding spiritual challenge to that promise. You can definitely dissolve a promise with a mature understanding and analysis. So it must be remembered that the moment of the dissolution of the promise is a moment of pain and suffering. But once this phase is over, joy will be witnessed by the observer, my dear friends. The process of dissolution may be painful, but then when you are completely over with the dissolution process, you will be free, you will be joyful, you will be happy. And that is what we all need to do if we have unfulfilled promises, my dear friends, or if we are in no way able to fulfill those promises. So it is very interesting to note that the promiser builds a thought form within his mental plane. If he fulfills his promise, this form melts away. If he does not fulfill his promise, no matter how lightly made, it bothers him in subtle ways, creating confusion in his mind and behavior. Isn't it really interesting to know, my dear friends? As long as as we have learned already that there's a pattern. As long as you keep fulfilling the promise, everything will be fine. But when you do not fulfill the promise, there is a disturbance in the pattern. And that disturbance, those waves, those ripples are going to affect you physically, emotionally, and mentally. And remember, my dear friends, a promise is a promise, no matter how lightly or seriously made. If the promise is forgotten by him, the thought form still exists and it is registered as a defect in the mental computer, which does many things wrong because of this invisible defect, my dear friends. Was there any situation, or was there any time that you have forgotten to fulfill a promise? Try to remember. And this is a homework that I'm going to give you right now, that once this presentation is over, you might want to list down how much ever that you can remember. Just write down all the promises that you made to others and to yourself. Whatever that you have promised to others, try to fulfill them or try to dissolve them. There are only two options. So this is how important it is to learn about the science of promises, my dear friends. So the thought form of a promise can be re-stimulated either in the mind of the one who promised or in the mind of the one who was promised. Just how beautiful is that? And every time the thought form is re-stimulated, it takes away the clarity of the mind and creates minor or major disturbances in it. This is something we really need to be conscious about, to be aware about. Re-stimulation, it happens to all of us all the time. So I try to keep reminding myself, I try to keep telling myself that do not make promises that you cannot keep. I try to keep telling myself that. But sometimes I succeed, sometimes I fail, but I try to keep learning. So in certain cases, one promises, but for a while does not carry it out. Later, he wants to meet his promise, but cannot find any opportunity to fulfill it because of many circumstances. But the thought form of the promise remains in his being as a sore spot until it is analyzed and dissipated. This is something that we all need to do. You need to really think before you make a promise. Think 10 times. Even if you're making a promise out of courtesy, out of good manners, or out of, the proper grooming that the society does. Just be mindful when you are making a promise. You might just say to a friend, come for dinner. And that friend might say, yes, I'll definitely come, but he doesn't turn up. These are very small things, but they affect us a lot. When you say, I'll definitely come, it's a promise. So then we really need to be mindful of what to say and how really we mean to fulfill those promises. And some people make false promises. I'm sure we all did at some point or the other. I'm sure somebody else, others also have made it to us, false promises. Let us not make false promises to anyone or to ourselves. And in this case, they have a weak thought form of a promise in their minds. And this thought form gradually grows and bothers them because the one who was promised nourishes the weak thought form by the force of his expectation, my dear friends. Just like the example that I've given to you, I invite a friend to come for lunch or dinner, and that he or she accepts to, come for lunch or dinner, but then that person doesn't turn up. My expectation still is running, and I will be utterly disappointed. And that expectation is going to create a thought form in the one who has promised to come or promised to do something. So this thought form is going to be created in the person's mind, and that will really disturb him or her. At the end of every day, is it all worth it? I mean, we can choose honesty as something that that is the need of the hour. Honesty is everything. So let us be as honest as possible. Let us promise only when we intend to fulfill it, only when we mean it. And the thought form of a false promise not only becomes a promise, but also a hated thought form within the man. Why is it hated? Because it is not fulfilled. As simple as that. So it is mostly such thought forms that weaken the memory and the clear thinking of a human being. When these thought forms create a foggy atmosphere in the mind, our memory is slowly weakening and clarity is lost. So this is something that we all need to really think about. And don't make a promise you cannot keep, and don't say something unless you mean it. Don't make a promise you cannot keep, and don't say something unless you mean it. Let us try to be more conscious, more aware. So it is very helpful to do a review to find your promises and either dissolve them consciously or fulfill them if possible, my dear friends. This is the homework. This is the challenge that I'm trying to give to you at the end after we finish the presentation. And a promise has a form element in it. It has etheric, astral, mental elements, and willpower. The melting process is almost impossible left to itself, but through logic and analysis, it is possible to dissipate it. Paying some taxes in the meantime for the delay. If we take a loan, my dear friends, we need to keep paying the interest until we repay the loan. So that is how this also works. When you promised something somebody and you do not fulfill it, you need to keep paying the interest. And what is that interest? It is all confusion, fogginess, no clarity in thinking. So this is the interest that you need to pay until you fulfill that promise or dissolve it. And promising to oneself is also a very serious matter. And in most cases, a person promises when he is in a higher state of consciousness or is soul infused. Most of us meditate. And when we are in a deep state of meditation, we feel that, we experience that oneness with the universe, oneness with everything around us, oneness with the higher forces, oneness with our guru, oneness with everything. At that point of time, we might tend to promise something to ourselves. There is a saying, my dear friends, as above, so below, as below, so above. So when we tend to promise to ourselves in such an elevated state of consciousness, and when we come out of meditation, we do not fulfill it. When we face the practical world, when we face the real practical world, we tend to do exactly the opposite of what we have promised in a elevated state of consciousness. And a promise made from such a level evokes positive polarization from the lower vehicles, but when the promise is not carried out, the positive polarization changes into negative polarization, my dear friends. And then the man on the personality level does exactly the opposite of what he promised in his inspirational or uplifted moments. And this eventually creates an intense inner conflict. See, one meditates when one does meditation. It's the soul that is involved over there, and the soul experiences it. The energy, the vibrations, the messages, everything is about the soul. But when one person comes out of the meditation, he suddenly becomes this personality. So that is how a positive polarization turns into negative polarization, when he does not fulfill the promise that he made in an elevated state of consciousness. Isn't it something real to really wonder about? Think about it, my dear friends. And the related situation also creates problems. Many people make various promises to their higher self, and when they do not carry them out, they try to hide from the light of the higher self and keep themselves busy with lower activities. This is really funny, my dear friends. When we meditate, we promise a lot to the higher self, higher worlds, or higher level masters. So many things when we are in that elevated state of consciousness. But suddenly, when we come out of meditation and when we become the personality, we forget all about it. I can relate this situation to another situation, another example that you might really understand this concept. See, I take a loan from you. I do not repay you. What do I do to avoid you? I hide. I hide here and there so that I am not caught by you, or I'm not seen, and I become invisible to you so that I don't have to repay the loan. But then someday or the other, you need to repay the loan. You have to repay the loan. We may hide from the person who has lent something to us, but then we cannot hide from the higher self, higher worlds, higher masters. Can we? So, but promises made to the higher self can never be forgotten, because the higher self eventually will create those crises in your life in which you recollect yourself and meet your promises through painful experiences, my dear friends. This is something that we really need to wonder about. So it is also true that we promise on various levels with our false eyes. Because we change our levels very often, we create conflicting promises within our nature. And on each level, we see things from a different point of views, different viewpoints, and we have different interests and also different relationships. And all the factors combined force us to make various promises to ourselves and to others, which are often conflicting. And conflicts created in these ways do not contribute to our serenity and growth. Isn't that true, my dear friends? This is something that I have learned personally and have benefited a lot, because we carry a lot of ice within ourselves by terming it as different relationships or different roles or different positions that we take in our life from different perspectives. We promise a lot by being in different roles or different viewpoints. As a daughter, I have a different point of view. As a mother, I will have a different point of view. As a sister, I will have a different point of view. As a friend, I may have a different point of view. As a boss, I might have a different point of view. As an employee, I might have a different point of view. So each and every point of view counts when we start making promises with these false eyes, false identity, my dear friends. So expectations are not promises. Let us talk about expectations now. If my friend promises me something, then I would definitely have expectations. But then if somebody doesn't promise me anything, but I still have expectations, those are not considered as promises, my dear friends. Because in expectations, you form a thought form which may obsess you gradually if you feed it with your imagination and thoughts. And generally, expectations fade away when the source of inspiration does not show the evidences of support for your expectations. So if a person doesn't promise you something or has not promised you anything, then that is not called as a promise, even though you expect a lot from that person. So, my dear friends, expectations are not promises. So it is very beneficial to clear your mind of the thought forms of expectations, because They consume a great amount of energy from your mental, emotional, and etheric nature. They create diffusion in your mind, which makes you take unreasonable actions or attitudes. Have you ever felt this happen in your life? Have you ever taken unreasonable actions? Or you might wonder why I did that. I don't understand why I did that. I don't understand why I said that. You might have lacked clarity of thought at that particular time. Or your mind must have become foggy that you couldn't think clearly. Ponder about why that has happened. Because when you understand the cause, you will understand the effect. Vows. Oh my God. This is something very, very, very important that we need to learn. Vows. When two people get married in any religion, no matter what religion it is, when two people get married, there are some vows that they say to each other that they will fulfill certain promises, and they make each other many promises in different ways. So vows are of a higher order, and they not only have etheric, emotional, and mental forces and the energy of the will, but they are also associated with the devas and higher beings, my dear friends. And the violation of vows creates serious disturbances in man's subtle bodies and his relation to with subjective forces, my dear friends. So vows are related to higher worlds, to devas, my dear friends. So breaking them is something very serious. As we go higher, our words, promises, and vows are taken more seriously because they are connected with speech and thought. And on higher levels, speech and thought are agents of creative forces, which bring into manifestation and objectification the things about which we talk and we think. We can take the oaths, pledges also into consideration. When one is entering into a certain profession, they take an oath, they take a pledge. So this is also something really, really important. This is definitely important for us to understand. So in breaking your vows, you start a destructive process within the forms and relationships which you have been building with your vows. And this destruction affects your higher and lower vehicles in many ways. And it is possible to break vows if they were taken under pressure or in a state of unconsciousness, or if the vows interfere in your relationships with greater principles, laws, and service. And if this is the case, the vows must be analyzed, brought into the light of your present consciousness, and cancelled. Vows can also be broken, but we need to make a spiritual discipline about it. We need to put in some true efforts, true understanding, real understanding, a logic and reasoning, and adding it with a spiritual challenge, we can dissolve it and we can cancel it by bringing light on the present consciousness, my dear friends. So we must start to practice living in the light of our soul and see things as they are. Let us start practicing seeing things as they are and not how we perceive it, or not how we have been conditioned or programmed to see something. This subject has been taken from one of Torquem Saradarian's books, my dear friends, and you can visit his work at www.esgfoundation.org, my dear friends. So we come to the end of this presentation of the science of promises, my dear friends. I would like to add something else also over here. Do not make a promise when you're too happy or too sad. Only make a promise when you're centered, you're balanced or in an equilibrium, you're calm and centered. Only when you promise in such a state will you be able to fulfill a promise. Never make a promise when you're too happy or too sad, because both are extremes. Do not make a promise when you're even just happy or just sad. Because a promise is a promise is a promise. That is something which we really need to think about. And I was amazed at the depth of the science of promises. Oh my God, we say so many things out of courtesy. When we go to a meeting or a party or something, we say so many things to each other that we really don't mean it. So I request everyone to be mindful, because I am also trying to be as mindful as possible to, to be able to fulfill those promises which I have made. So please be mindful about the promises that you make. Think 10 times, be aware, be conscious. And this will give you a lot of clarity in your thinking and will save you from a lot of physical, emotional, and mental disturbances. Thank you so much, my dear friends, for giving this opportunity for me to share this knowledge with you. I will see you next time with yet another beautiful subject. Thank you so much, my dear friends. This is Parinitha Patri signing off.